overview, I mean, we created this policy brief across the 4 sibling projects. First, we went through, and I mean, we've been having various discussion sessions over the last years. The 5 points you see in front of you: data harmonization, semantic interoperability, metadata, data exchange, and governance, where the 5 recurring topics where we were all agreed these are areas we've got something to say on.
He's actually connect with the comment of this guy. It took us a while because it was a consensus process.
Exactly. and we spent quite a while consenting and pulling the consensus together and distilling that down to clear salient points. We hope they're salient. I will try and present them. So, starting with data harmonization. So I'm always going through the policy brief, the various sections we have there. And I mean, the background is when we're looking at the Green Deal data space, such a really wide array of different communities with very different requirements on all levels, be it to data models, to semantics, to security, to God knows what. And I mean, we've got geospatial, we've got biodiversity, climate, all sorts of stuff. And the problem in this world is each of these communities have basically reinvented their own little standards. But it's so much easier to invent your own than to take something existing. And now we have this wonderfully vibrant landscape of contradictory standards, which we would like to try and bring together. And what are our recommendations to somehow help this to converge? First point is really investing in generic cross-domain standard data structures and vocabularies. And I mean, there's a difference between a basic conceptual model versus an implementation model. Experience has shown if you have 2 implementation models, but they're both based on the same conceptual model, it is so easy to get from here to there because we've got the same structure, the same multiplicities. If these have evolved on their own, I mean, I've seen cases there ain't no way from here to there. It's sad but true. And so if we can get these basic structures and also the vocabularies, and I mean, this needs work, this needs effort, it needs to be done, it doesn't happen from nowhere. Related to that is promoting open and well-documented formats. One thing we'd like to plug for, we know things like Inspire have been evilly maligned. Oh, it's a failure. Not really. And I mean, if one sees what Inspire has changed in the brains of all of the environmental agencies in Europe over the last 20 years, and folks who 15 years ago could not spell UML are happily working with this, things are converging a bit. And I mean, there were a lot of mistakes made, starting from the fact that they had us design conceptual models, which were then automatically transformed to XML schema done. Anybody who knows IT good practice knows this be bad practice. But there's a lot of good knowledge and structures in there. Don't throw them out with the bathwater. Final point with data harmonization is also investing in tools for data transformation. We have that already on various points. We need that on metadata. We also need it on data because we will never have the common format. Semantic interoperability. I mean, this is all closely related. We had problems splitting between data harmonization, semantic interoperability, metadata. It's one continuum. We tried to put what we can put where. And as already mentioned in the last point on harmonization, we have so many different communities. We are dealing with a digital power of Babel. And I mean, at the same time, we need all of this different data to be able to solve the problems. We need to understand the data. I mean, it needs to be more than a number. We need to know what the numbers represent. So that's why we're also pushing for semantic interoperability. The Data Act has also nicely acknowledged the fact there is work to be done. There are lots of high ideals, but there's a lot of on-the-ground work necessary. And one of the core things underpinning this are the various vocabularies, taxonomies, code lists, ontologies, call them what you want. For me, that's a continuum from a flat list to a complex structure, but from our way of, I mean, this concept. I think Bauer had the plant versus the plant. And I mean, that's the problem with normal keywords. You don't know, is it the green growing thing or is it the big box spewing black stuff? So being able to point to these concepts can be very valuable. And what our recommendations really promote is try and get away from the bloody freestyle keywords, try and utilize such stuff, adopt existing standards for structure. I mean, the one thing which we also always see is that people start out and they see the standards and say, oh my God, that's much too big. I'm just doing this. I will just do my little database. And they do that, and then a few weeks later, somebody said, we need to add this, and then to add this. And over the years, it grows into a Frankenstein monster, which is even more complicated than the original standard was, but is not aligned with anything, and help you God if you want to interpret that. So please bear this in mind and maybe investigate these standards earlier. And again, we need these vocabularies, but vocabularies are painful to create. It needs a lot of work. It does not come out of nowhere. And it often includes things like the IADOPT observable property ontology we were discussing yesterday. Without this, it's such a waste of good data and technology. And we need to go that final, not mile, it's a few meters. But if we don't have that, the rest is for naught. Metadata, again, closely related. We need it to find stuff. The Data Act is quite aware of the fact that metadata management is a serious issue. And I mean, if we're lucky, we have some metadata. In many cases, it is just buried in prose. You have to then, I mean, great if it's English, but there are some other languages out there which even Google Translate is still struggling with. And it's also partially lost in translation. I mean, we now have so many different metadata standards. With 4 projects, we only have 4 metadata standards. So I mean, it could be 5, but still. So that's again a problem. And recommendations. Despite all these standards, we're still finding some gaps, especially when dealing with type of measured observed data we're dealing with here. There is definitely work to be done, including information from the observation, measurement, and sample standard to get more on the methodology, how this data was obtained. I adopt data product specifications and also better information on data provenance. We need predefined mappings and transformation tools. We need to really acknowledge the fact that creating good metadata takes time. And it takes resources. And this will not be well solved as an afterthought in the final weeks of the project. Oh my God, we have to do that. This needs to be planned from the get-go. And the moment you start setting things up, start documenting it, think about what you need. And also in various European projects, it'd be good to really have that mandated. And if that is clear in the call text, then it must be followed. I mean, I know from evaluating proposals, there were times when I would really have liked to point things like that out, but if the call doesn't require it, they were good. So, good to a plug to you. Next one, data exchange. So, I mean, this is what the data spaces are supposed to be about. They don't host the data, they don't process the data, but they enable the exchange from all sorts of different sources. Okay, all sorts of usage and authenticated users. We are doing our nice little demonstrator. But I mean, the implementation, when we started this plot out a few weeks ago, we thought, okay, this is going to be simple. We have good geeks, they will deploy this. It's a few weeks later, and they are still chewing on it. So, I mean, it is not rocket science, but it is not. And that's one of my worries. I mean, I know how overburdened the various environmental administrations across Europe are providing very basics, and it's adding a further burden layer. So there we have to be really careful that whatever is mandated here is lightweight enough that that doesn't strangle the organizations. And I mean, I always feel guilty for my work. Like I realize how much real environmental work could be done with what I'm being paid. And I mean, then I realize, okay, they need the data to do their real work. So I am doing something worthwhile, but I really don't want to waste these very scarce resources. Recommendations is adopting and promoting open, easy to use technologies. ideally open source implementations which are stable, utilizing the various existing APIs and trying to integrate that into the data space, and again, offering various conversion tools so we can get from here to there. And here we're also coming to the challenges. I'm not going to go into details. It's basically what Andreas has been bitching about the last 2 days, the GDPR issues with how the data spaces are currently functioning. That, I mean, my understanding is that if you have data, I want your data, you know I have exactly this data. That is not really the way we foresee European freedom. And also the overly centralized approach. So I mean, there I need to look at the latest architecture. I'm not gonna say anything more on this. I said it anyway. Final point is governance. And I mean, this is what we all tend to ignore because we be geeks, we do the geeky part, but we need some sort of umbrella or hands over us to enable all of this to move forward. And that brings me to another problem we've been seeing is that so much in Europe is project-based. We have these 2 to 4 year projects, and the first year or two, we are scrambling to get our feet on the ground and figure out who is who and who has what role and how do we do this. And just when you're finally really a well-functioning team, you're split apart again. I mean, I would so love to take these 4 projects and continue because now we really got it. And now we have to restart. But that seriously hinders long-term efforts, going back to the semantic resources vocabulary. This is not something you can do in a one-off project, and I've seen that's also the danger. We now have hundreds of such vocabularies. Every project invents their own because it sees standards. What, that's too complicated, I will invent my own. You've got all of these little stub ontologies out there, and they are distracting people from finding the good ones, and they look decent at the start, but then you go into the details and you realize, oh, they never got there. And then the next project comes and it doesn't build on that, it starts over. So there we would really need some way of ensuring sustainability over this. And a further point is also, especially with the politics of the last half year, we are getting warier and warier of putting all of our data on international cloud solutions where, yes, formally AWS claims it is all stored in Europe and the data going to Northern Virginia is just accounting. I didn't even know why they need our accounting data in Northern Virginia. I mean, right now it's still working, but the way the world is going, tomorrow they could dream a different dream and say, well, no, close. So I think we really need to grow up as a continent and get our crap together and have some solid European solutions here. I mean, that's why I love what Howard is doing in Poland. And recommendations. What are recommendations? Try integrating all of the existing stuff. Find some strategies to attract open data providers. Is a bit related to the fact that it gets more and more complicated, and the open data providers, they're not getting anything for this. They are doing this because it should be done, but the burden is getting higher and higher, and how do we find a balance there? And the final point is one which we spent a lot of time chewing on, mandating the citation of data. And the world is splitting more and more into individual roles. And it's hitting the point where some people are data managers. And that's basically the end of your career. I mean, that tends to then be the failed scientist. Oh, you weren't good enough to do what you planned. You aren't a good enough ecologist. Become a data manager and you get pushed in the back room and sort of ignored. This is hard work. And can we somehow acknowledge that and find ways of showing that this hard work really came to something? I mean, that's why I like the GDDS approach of assigning DOIs to all downloads, then scanning the literature. Is this DOI cited? And if it's cited, they know their data has done something good and that the DOI also becomes persistent. Something like that in the data space world could be an interesting approach. Yes, providing some support to standardization initiatives. I mean, here a bit of information. I'm worried about standardization dying. after decades of austerity. And if I look at how various standardization organizations are going, and the big players are withdrawing more and more, it tends to be small fools who somehow keep the ball rolling. It's not getting better, and we need these standards. So, and most of it is self-funded. So this is a further point where some support will be essential, otherwise all of these dreams will crumble. Further related point is training. We do all sorts of good stuff, and the problems with geeks is we get it to run, and then we're very happy and jump up and down, and then we run away and find something else. And nobody ever sits down to explain what we done. So we really need to also find ways of extracting this knowledge out of our brains and providing it to the next one trying to do this. This is why we need more DA. We need science and technology communicators. And also at least trying to somehow foster cross-domain harmonization. I know it's hard, but again, if you build on the existing very low-level conceptual models, you're halfway there. And a lot of these models really apply to many, many, many domains. And I mean, I know it from, again, my observations and measurements data. I've been working on this area for 20 years. Every environmental domain I talk to says, oh, the mere air quality, we have nothing to do with water. And I mean, that's sort of hit the point a few years ago. I finally did the definitive presentation on this, determining the color of a smiley face. And first, everybody's confused, and then they realize, okay, I mean all of them. This way, I keep them, because if I talk about air quality, I've lost the rest of the audience. But we need to convince all of these groups there is so much similarity. I've spent 20 years looking at their data from the other side of the databases. It just keeps repeating. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. This is the content of our policy brief. Please take it to heart at whatever levels you can and see how we can somehow move all of this forward.
Hi. Oh, yeah. No, yes. So now we can.
Questions now how we finish discussing. I mean, we are getting very short on time.
Yes.
But I think another 15, 20 minutes should be possible.
Exactly.
For the panel? For something panel-like.
Okay.
Who else do we have on the panel?
Yes.
We have Joan, Quentin, then someone from usage, and I think we have somebody
Collected
online,
Yeah.
Fabio, and then Andreas again.
Me again?
Yes. You were going to talk anyway.
Non-troublemaker.
Kati, can I have one question? What are you doing with these recommendations? What will happen with these recommendations? Besides sitting in these slides, and so what is the next activity with these recommendations? Because I really like a lot of them. And
This is our final outcome from our 4 projects. It is launched herewith. Can you recommend how to better disseminate this? Our problem is we are all geeks who are not really science communicators.
so IDSA would be glad to take some of these recommendations to make something sustainable. So, I mean, that's also partly how we see our role. When a project ends, usually things go into a drawer and then the next innovative thing is invented, but we are here to be sustainable and to sustain over time, take the things that work, that are good, especially coordination and all these activities that are required that you pointed to. Glad to also partly try to identify things that we are already doing that help to end this.
I mean, semi-aligned at certain points where they're pushing further in and saying, there we need a bit more detail. And I mean, how is it easiest for you? I mean, we have this document, we have the whole document. Diego, where is the document nicely online? It's somewhere on Zenodo.
Yes, it's on Zenodo document, and you can.
With this, you get to the Zenodo version.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, to move this forward, I mean, the problem is our projects are mostly now wrapping up.
So while I was outside, I was moderating the Innovation and Policy Forum that IDSA has launched last month. In this forum, we are discussing European policymaking, international policymaking from Japan, China, India, UAE, Brazil, to try to create a common sense of what doesn't. So, I mean, these recommendations sound like a very good potential input for this.
I mean, that was exactly our hope. We didn't quite know who to address, but our hope was if we can manage to nicely pack it in a nutshell, we will find somebody to say, please.
So until 18th of July, we will be quite busy with the call for evidence of the Commission regarding the data union strategy. That's something that we're currently working on as a very concrete activity. But after that and beyond that, we're open for other activities. And yeah, glad to bring this to the guys.
And just for sure, the projects like Sage will take up on these, outcomes from our projects, because we are, some of us, there, and other projects that we are involved, like, also the agricultural data space, seeds.
Right. Perfect. So I also will invite the hubs at some point to this process. Great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay.
Exactly why we did the event.
And if you want to go there, and then we can continue this same conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, so we also have Fabio online, which is representative from Usage Project. So
Fabio?
yes, if you want to say something, Fabio, just confirm that you are here and you can hear us.
Yeah, good morning to all. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because okay. No, just 2 cents from our side about the data harmonization. So for us, it's important to, let's say, do not reinvent the wheel. So do not discard the word did for in Inspire by the Inspire directive about the data harmonization. So because it's important to have some common data model during the sharing of the data. So I think it could be it should be a starting point for starting from the Inspire data model, and in case also extend them to address the specific needs or some sectorial communities. And that's all. Yeah, because it is important to have common data model when you share the data. I like to mention some, for instance, an anecdote. Or in Italy, some years ago, there was in the GIS communities in some blogs a question: who is Giancarlo, for instance, because a user downloaded an official data from, I don't remember if he downloaded the data from a municipality site, or in any case an official data set. He found in the data set an attribute whose name was Giancarlo. So probably some user edited the data and add an attribute with its name. So it is so sometimes the data that are shared, there is no corresponding well-known documented data model. So I think it is important to have a common shared data model, for instance, starting from Inspire and then also extend eventually the Inspire data model.
Thank you, Fabio, for that. If any one of you wants to start, like,
I think you need to ask some questions.
Okay, so
Or you can ask the audience.
yes, of course, yes. So if anyone has questions about these recommendations, please come to them.
Is your last chance?
Yes. Well, I hope not, because of what we were speaking before. This is not the last chance to talk about all these recommendations, but
The last chance for you.
Let's delay at least.
yes.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make a comment just in general about the sort of things we talked about. And one thing we haven't really got in depth with is understanding the people behind the thing. You heard a lot about the technical solutions, but really understanding your market base, your community. You need a bunch of people, a lot of people who want these data and want to use these data and who are going to be engaged in building the standards, for instance, things, but also getting more value out of data. I think that community building is a really important part for all these things.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
And I think this is definitely important because people is behind, like it's not only data and numbers and that, people is really behind all that. And what do you think that some things could be done to leverage that?
I think we discussed it a bit between the projects about that there should be an S after data space, because that the space is a way you can make these data spaces a community use project rather than being seen as a big lithic thing with data. If somebody knows where their community's data are, or even if you're outside the community, you know that community's data is in that place, then you kind of know where to go. And so I mentioned before in our previous Green Deal data space meeting a couple of weeks ago, along with that in the original call, it was Green Deal data space in the title, but if you read the actual call text, it said Green Deal data spaces. And so there's always been this internal conflict within our projects about whether we're really talking about one big thing or not.
That brings me to a question: is how is the interoperability between data spaces foreseen? I mean, we will need that regardless, even if there is one Green Deal data space where we all manage to agree. But I mean, right next to it, but agriculture, that is the closest one. But then there are several others, things like health and the like, are also related. And we're always going to have use cases across these data spaces. If it's a federation of data spaces, that also goes back to your question. I mean, if this federation works well, then it doesn't matter, do we federate Green Deal and agriculture or various Green Deal dialects? That really depends on the basic interoperability. And I mean, you'll definitely lose some search functionality because the semantic, the metadata structures will be very different, but to at least enable some sort of access.
Yeah, it's not seamless so far. And I think also for the next years, it won't be. But it's good. So if I travel to Asia, I know it's not the first thing to shake hands. It's bowing. Yeah, I know that's the protocol. I can adapt to the protocol. It doesn't help me to order food, but it helps me to not piss anyone really off, you know? And I think this level of interoperability of, in this term, cultures is something that we established already in the data space world. So it's enough to say, I speak HL7 in the healthcare sector versus I speak something else in the Green Deal area, and agree to disagree on how to communicate now about the content. But
I mean, things like HL7 already going very much into the semantics.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the basic authentication layer, I mean, that would be sort of the primal thing of, do I have to have 10 identities, one identity per data space, or can I identify myself once and allow that identity to go across the 10 data spaces? That would be the very first level of interoperability. Next level is then also sort of, how do I request the data?
Yeah.
And I mean, all of the semantics are then on top, which are applicable both to the catalog and then to the final data you have.
I mean, this is an equilibrium between a bottom-up and a top-down approach. We have the Commission desperate to create the digital economy, and we have been giving instructions on creating the Green Deal data space. There is only one Green Deal data space in Europe. That's the one. Who is going to build it? I don't know. That is the starting point. But of course, we need communities inside that data space. And in the last versions of the blueprint, this is called use cases, actually. Now you have the full ecosystem of data that's probably this digital economy thingy. Then we have the data spaces, and below the data spaces, we have the use cases. And to me, these use cases are these communities that are trying to really do something, because the data space is just an infrastructure. It's like a road. In the road, you can distribute packages, or you can incentivize tourism. You can do whatever with the road. No, so that's probably the thing. So it is really important, the communities, but we cannot deny that there is something, some kind of a directive that asking us to create one data space in support of the Green Deal policies. But since the Green Deal policies are diverse, then the use cases should be diverse, but they should live in this single infrastructure in principle.
It's like in the Sage also we have the use case of pollinators, for example. We have and it's actually called the pollinators data space. So it's like we are going from the more generic, which has of course less semantics, more basic things, the more specific where you can add more detailed information and so. And that's also how we can go to other data spaces like agriculture, right? So agriculture for us is like gonna be very important to have at least some basic kind of possible interoperability at some level. So I think it's like the higher we go is the less specific, but we try to have some common building blocks. That I would, that's my hope, and I am involved in both at least. So I hope that to be part of that.
Talking about the authorization and things like that, it seems that we are getting to some kind of an authorization at the global level, so at the European level. So that at least something that we could use. Then if we agree once and for all on the technology to actually exchange that data, that is kind of what we need. We have been so sensible in the semantics here that for us it's really important because we are scientists and we like to know what we are talking about actually. So that's the why this kind of a piece here is so prominent, I suppose. The other recommendations about the metadata and the data harmonization, that is almost independent from the data space. Those are things that have been chasing us for ages, and we shall persist in fixing that. Those are other things. And this comment that you say that metadata requires time and effort, I like a lot because we need to keep repeating that. So to me, instead of, and I'm going to say it again and now publicly, I don't like data management plans. I hate them. You know why? Because it's just a plan.
Empty shell, which you get your check mark for.
Exactly. What I like is creating metadata, creating the catalog. Actually, starting by that. And that is my plan. In some sense, no, the result of my plan. That's a tangible thing that they have. The catalog with the data sets there, with the right metadata, with the right semantics there. That is the transformation of the plan into something actionable. And that is really important, and we need to persist on insisting on this.
What is it included in your plan to harmonize the different existing approaches to do the very same thing, the very same thing? So I guess there are already.
You mean in terms of a change or in terms
of the semantical part? So I like the ambition to say, okay, we want to do concrete things, and we just cramp up the sleeves and do it. Are there other activities out there already ongoing who try to achieve the same thing, or is it like you're filling a gap that exists?
I believe we are not the only ones realizing this.
No, but for sure there are so many other initiatives. But like it was also mentioned, I think that allowing and understanding and being aware that we need to have the possibility to establish mappings between existing models because not everybody will use the same thing. Of course, we can have as a data space, for example, in the Green Deal or in agriculture, some kind of cross-domain models that we believe are like the building blocks for interoperability. But as we go further into the specific use cases, as we said, so we need more detailed semantic, more information. So, and these, of course, can be quite diverse. And then we need to establish the possibility to establish mappings and crossroads between the models. That's what I would try to do.
I mean, some work has been done. I know the Inspire high-value dataset community has been working on getting the ISO 9115 metadata, which was required under Inspire, math to DCAT, and to my understanding, there's also conversion tools. So
it's possible, yeah.
There you can get.
And also schema.org. So there are like different mappings already established, for example, at the level of the metadata.
I mean, Stack is a bit.
Stack also we have.
Is Stack already mapped to DCAT?
we have done this exercise also with guys from OGC. We have some conceptual mapping is not like still like fully published, but we have like a conceptual mapping done between DCAT and Stack.
I mean, Stack is such a moving target.
But has even the question makes sense? Stack is a catalog. DCAT is a vocabulary.
No, Stack also has a vocabulary. Right? There is a model. There is a data model of Stack.
Is it?
Yes.
Stack is just an extension of the features API and just a bunch of assets.
No, it's called, what is the name? Maybe
Maybe
Tomek, Piotr knows better the name. The name of
the stack is naturally the schema plus some APIs, and the whole exercise was simply to have the reference point in the DCAT, form these different representations. Like there was a stack, there was this CSW from next year's, so yeah, that was the starting point, and the records. So the point was to be mapped to properties, and including this from features, and including those which are aligned with the properties of the protocol like stack or like the records. And that led, for example, to some outcomes recently and the alignment of the records with the stack, because there were some differences which simply were not needed at this point. So we're not, yeah, there's no like model for stack. It's set of the properties. Set of properties be tied to something. I mean, is defined. Yeah.
Stack specification is called, which is defining the set of classes and properties, basically.
I'm assuming that's not just covering the core stack spec.
Core
and
stack.
I mean,
Yes,
the
extensions.
covers the extensions.
We had to also move into some extensions, right? To also talk about
Who is actually the owner of where is the home for this mapping?
yeah.
And we would prefer to have it like we started from records simply because we know where is the home for records. But then there were some other implementations, so we extended that to stack. But naturally, somebody needs to maintain that, and this is like okay. And then you have many of these extensions. We don't know what will be the. I mean, stack is at least aligned with features. Extensions are aligned to mapping. Yes, so.
I mean, without the extensions,
Yes.
you don't get very far. So I mean, there you can really just do the bare bone basics. If you really want to describe your data set, you need the extensions.
What
Yes,
to add?
we could. I think that it doesn't have any solution now. Like, what is the future of the records extension? I mean, that's in the application that will have the extension, and there isn't even the folder in the record specifications for that. But yeah, who is defining them? How do we align with some of the other standards? It's like the question now.
I mean, taking a slight step back, could one say it would make sense to align all metadata standards we're dealing with DCAT and try and have DCAT as the central point of truth? And then, I mean, 115 we already have, Stack is on its way, the EVV formats that pCube is working with could also be mapped to DCAT. And I think that could then be the central haven where we can all interoperate.
Yes, I'm not sure if there is here that the mapping in 115 got records or the other way always does that. So this is something maybe to confirm. But if we would have this, again, we are coming back to who is maintaining that mapping, right? What is the? We had that with WWC and we had that with Google. Simply the schema.org. There was something that were implementing that, and yeah, it's mostly bottom up now. It have what it means.
Also, related question on schema.org. I'd be curious if anybody here has insights how that is evolving. Because, I mean, it's a very untransparent system. And I've been following my observation concept. And when I looked at schema.org a few years ago, that had nothing to do with what we have under OGCI. So, but it's been updated. And 3 years ago, it was totally over-focused on some specific medical concept. And I recently looked at it, and now it's almost an OGC observation. Where did this come from? Is there even documentation on these changes? Does anybody understand how this world works?
That's a good question. Yeah, we're using schema.org a lot for some specifications of the, I don't know if you heard the research object procreates and that digital objects that we have. But the governance of schema.org is also very not clear. So how to keep track of the versions and everything is.
And I mean, I know SOSA was originally developed because Simon Cox was trying to bring the OVC observation concept towards schema.org and tried to create that and provide it. And they were seriously not interested. I've rarely seen Simon so miffed that people weren't interested in him. And then for years, it was just very parallel to each other. And now I recently, I mean, I'd been ignoring it, and now I recently stumbled across it again, and it is almost ONM. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to kind of start closing the conversation. So I would like to ask all of you to one, maybe it's a difficult question, but like which one of these recommendations for faulting do you think it's the most important from your perspective, like personal experience? I mean, I know that everything is important and many things are important, but from your perspective, expertise, and work in the projects, like what is the most important thing or that, for example, SAGE project and other initiatives should take into account when going forward with this initiative? Continue to start because you are here with me, but
I really want you to start with me. The most important.
Yeah, or the thing that you
thing that comes to mind. I mean, I because we're here with the Living Planet symposium thing, so because that's a massive thing over there, but they all are in their own bubble, even if they don't realize it. And I come from a completely different world in our own bubble, and we also don't realize it, and we don't talk enough. And there does need to be discussions for different data spaces. But yes, there's no point a whole bunch of remote sensing people creating products for remote sensing people. They need to be creating products for other people, but they're not talking to. I think you still need venues where we can talk and treat our different and get out of our comfort zone a bit and talk to people and try and find common languages. I don't know if I really answered your question, but
yes, I think you did. So, Matt, you're going to like this because the question is, which is the most important recommendation that SAGE project and all projects should take into account from these recommendations? So, Kathy, if you want to.
Okay, I mean, I totally agree with we need common interoperable. We need to get these silos broken up and people aware of each other. And to my view, very related on that is again semantics. I mean, the authentication and all of that I know is going to be done anyway. And my worry is we've got this wonderful highway, but we only have these undefinable amoeba blobs going along it. So we really need some structure so that it's what we get out of it is useful.
It was undefined again?
What?
You said something undefined. You
I'm not sure which word wasn't defined for you. I said we need more semantics, so we don't have the undefined was that we've got this wonderful highway infrastructure, but we've got these amorphous blobs sort of slowly oozing along.
yeah.
Roaming around.
For me, the recommendation is this data exchange, reusing the APIs and the web services that we have been using, but in this more trusted way.
Correct. Andreas, do you want to add something?
Oh, data exchange GDPR compliant.
Easy. Thanks.
Fabio?
And Fabio, if you want to.
No, from my side, I agree also to probably the DCAT standard for metadata will be the So it is now the format for exchanging metadata in Europe. So, and as mentioned, Katie mentioned, there is some huge work to, let's say, derive some transformation rule, or so XSLT file to transform the inspired metadata in ISO format into DCAT formats, trying to maintain as much as possible all the information. There are some difficulties on some metadata elements, but there is a huge work, and I think, yeah, this is the standard that in the end should be used for the exchange of the metadata.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.